There was this quote from Steve Jobs that really changed the way I see things that I heard a really long time ago, and I'll just read it for you real quick. It's a little bit long, but I think it's really important. So it goes, when you grow up, you tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your job is just to live your life inside the world. Try not to bash into the walls too much. Try to have a nice family life, have fun, save a little money. That's a very limited life. Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. I remember hearing that while I was in high school, I think it was, or just a little bit afterwards. And it really did open up my mind just hearing it, because when I was that young, I would always think, oh, those people know how to do things. Those people are the experts. They must know so much to be able to do that. Like, I wanted to become a web developer, and so I would think, oh, it must be so hard. There's so many things that you have to learn. And then I started going into college classes for being a web developer. And I noticed that nobody else was really applying themselves in the class that I was in, at least. Nobody was really applying themselves. And so I just thought, okay, well, maybe it's just these people. And so I would try really hard. I would, spend late nights just to do a class project just because I wanted to make it better, not even because it was required to pass the class or anything. I just was enjoying what I was doing. And I got pretty good at it pretty quickly, enough so that then the teacher would have me go and help. And I thought, okay, well, I don't know why I'm paying to come here and help people. But anyways, and then this happened again in the next class. And then it started to happen in the third class. And I was like, nah, it's okay. I'll just practice it on my own then. If it's just gonna keep being like this, I might as well do it myself. And then I thought, well, maybe once I'm actually working, then it will be, more like I'm going to work with some amazing people. They're going to know so much. And the same kind of thing happened again. The majority of people just don't really try that hard. They don't really, either they aren't capable or they just don't try that hard. And I think that's half of the principle. One, that just people don't try that hard. And the other is that they probably don't know as much as you think that they do. So this sort of perception that somebody else knows more than me it's true, they know more than you, but probably not as much more as you think. It's probably just like 20% more or 30% more. And if you just spend that time to get up to speed, you do your 10,000 hours to become an expert, you're probably gonna be more skilled at that thing than the majority of people. And this principle has proved true for me in so many respects, in development or in marketing or in just business. Like, so many people that you think that they just know so much more than you. They're so much better than you in these things. And then you just go, you focus, and then you build that skill for a year straight, and you are just going crazy on it. And then you come back and those people are still roughly where they were, and you're like 3 times further than they are. And it's not to kind of make them feel bad or anything, but it's just that, oh, I thought that was some sort of limit that I couldn't even get to. And actually, no, that wasn't even close to the limit. That was just what that person was doing. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because I kind of hope that more people can come to that realization that the world is made by people who are no smarter than you are. So you might be seeing people do things that you think don't make sense, and you tell yourself, well, there must be something about it that I don't understand. There must be some reason why they're doing that. There must be some reason why they're not doing what they should. But it's probably the case that they just don't know any better. And so you have this perception, you see this potential improvement that could be made, and yet you're not doing it because you think that these other people know better, when in reality they just don't know better. But just you thinking that they know better is stopping you from doing even better than they, which is kind of crazy, right? So they are just out of ignorance getting more results than you. So if you just had more confidence that actually you know better, the outcome for everyone would be greater. And so it's just like this lack of self-confidence, this insecurity or overdone humility, when in actuality you should be the one who is doing that. You should be the one giving that service, making that product, getting those results for people, making things better. You should be the one with that client. And it's not from a place of like envy. It's more like that's just not the reality. Like if your thing is better, then I'm pretty sure that person, assuming your marketing and finances are all other aspects are equal, that person is probably going to pick you instead. And that's how the market is supposed to work. Things are supposed to compete based on their value and their merits and the marketing and perception and so on. But you're operating from this preconceived notion that other people know better than you or that you can't do it. And that's just not true. You can do it. And they probably knew less than you when they did it. So if you can just build up that confidence and just be realistic. Don't think that there are some experts that just know infinitely more than you and so you can never catch up to them. It would be insulting for you to even attempt to try and compete with them. It's just not true. You will go and you could work at those companies and then you will realize only then, oh, those people are probably just like me, if not even less capable than I am. And that's what it would take for you to probably realize that is the case. That's kind of what I had to do. I would go and work at different places and then realize, oh, they don't know that much more than me, or they actually know less than me. That's crazy. I never would have thought that. And that would happen in many different fields. Like I've had many different interests, throughout my life, and like whether it was skateboarding or development or business or marketing or whatever, it doesn't matter. The same pattern always persists across everything, that the majority of people are just not that good at most things. They have only a surface level knowledge on the majority of things, and then some people have a little bit more. And even those people, once they get going, they just do the basic functions to keep the job or to perform their daily tasks. And that's it. Not that many people are trying to become Michael Jordan of software development. Just go out and try something that you think that you can't do, or that you think other people know better than you, but you have this idea that you really want to implement, or this business that you really want to start. Like, just try something, because you're already doing more than most people ever even dare to try by just doing something. Inaction is probably the biggest thing, just not doing anything because you're paralyzed by this belief that you can't do it or that other people will do it better than you. It's just rarely true. And even when they know more than you can outwork them the majority of the time. The only people that you won't be able to beat by either just being naturally smarter than them or more hardworking than them are people that are like top tier. Let's say I wanted to be the best at basketball and I had amazing genetics for basketball. I'm still not gonna probably beat Kobe Bryant because he has amazing genetics and works really hard and was obsessed and all that, right? But at least I'm competing with Kobe Bryant at that point, right? So I don't really see the downside of working really hard at this thing that you want to be good at. Even if there are other smart people, well, then you just end up in the same category as them. That works. That's good enough. You don't have to become like the only one, and nobody will ever say that you're the best one. Some people will say Michael Jordan's the best. Some people will say Kobe Bryant's the best. Some people will say LeBron James is the best. And it will always be a debate because people have preferences. So you're never going to achieve that sort of title of the best or the second best because it's all subjective, right? So just do whatever you can to make the thing that you want to happen, make it happen in the world, and don't think that you can't do it. Like the quote said, everything around you was made by another person that is around your intelligence. It's interesting because this also goes into like actually attacking the task itself. You think that a problem is too hard for you and only somebody else would be able to figure it out. And that's not true either, because it's the same thing, like you think that you couldn't make this type of company. Making a company is just a set of problems that need to be solved. And so it's the same thing as solving this difficult problem. Like if you think you can't learn a particular coding language, or you think you can't learn how to do this type of marketing, or you can never learn public speaking, or how to present yourself on camera and be fluid with your thoughts and so on, you can figure it out. If you just take the first step of like trying it out, that is going to give you so much learning experience just by doing it once. And then you'll do it 5 times, and then it's like you've learned infinitely more. Once you've done it 100 times, then it's second nature practically at that point. And then 1,000 times, 5,000 times, it's natural, it's fully natural. But yeah, people just keep believing in experts, and that only experts know the best thing to do, and they will only trust an expert for advice on this topic, and they can't figure it out themselves. And that has just never proved to be the case. One of my favorite Sam Ovens videos, it's fully talking about how outsiders are usually the ones who make innovations, as opposed to people that are in the category. They actually don't usually innovate that much because they approach everything with the frame in mind. They're not thinking outside the box. They're not thinking of breaking the box. They're just, we work inside of this and we make everything as efficient inside of this box as possible. Think like the improvement from iPhone to iPhone, but that type of invention didn't necessarily create the iPhone. It just improves it. And I think that's a very good example. I think the one thing that will sort of force you to think this way though is when you absolutely need to, like when circumstances require that you become good at this particular type of task and you don't have a choice, you can't hire anybody to do it, nobody's there to help you. You will read whatever books you have to, you will watch whatever videos you need to, and you will just figure it out. If you find it hard to get yourself to do it, maybe eventually circumstances will just force you and you will have to. Like if you have no sales coming through your landing page, suddenly you're gonna get way better at copywriting out of necessity, or maybe you'll find the person to help you, whatever, but it's just much better to figure it out, solve the problem, overcome those limiting beliefs. And I feel like I've become a person that I can respect much more so after really applying that lesson and realizing that if I want something to happen, I have to make it happen. I need to try my best. I can't wait for somebody to come and help me because nobody's going to. So I might as well just figure it out, and the sooner I figure it out, the sooner I can benefit from it. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about a character trait that will get other people to respect you more, look up to you, help you to respect yourself more, and why in business you don't have any other choice than to have this trait. So I was having a conversation with an executive not that long ago, and we were talking about different issues that were going on in the company, like employees not doing their jobs, results not being where they're supposed to be, things not progressing, things not getting done. And a lot is getting done at the same time, but it's never enough. And that's normal in business. Like that, you should expect to never be 100% satisfied with the results of things, and that things aren't perfect, things are going wrong. That's normal. When you're starting a business, you're basically signing up for just solving problems all day. The thing that I took issue with was more so the attitude about the problems, and how it seemed like the blame was always being put out on the other people, or it's always somebody else's fault. Oh, they didn't do their job, he didn't follow up, they didn't do what they should have done, or they should know better, and so on, right? And some people are just naturally like that, where they tend to blame other people. We tend to just sort of gravitate away from people like that because they always want to put the blame on other people. And if we're in their radius, eventually we're just getting blamed for things all the time. Whether it's our fault or not, it doesn't really matter. Even if it was their fault, they will blame us. But why is this such a problem, not just in our personal relationships, but even more so when we're running a business, especially if we're an operator or an owner or a founder, whatever? Why doesn't it work? Well, it's because it's our fault, really. Because if somebody makes a bad decision, you hired them. It's your fault. It's your problem. If somebody doesn't do what's right, it's your fault. If they didn't follow the manual, it's still your fault. Or maybe they didn't have a manual to follow the instructions properly. Maybe you're just expecting them to do what you would do, but they don't have that information in their head. They were not raised the same way as you. They haven't had the same experiences. They're not going to just come to the same conclusion that you would without being told that they're supposed to do that. And then let's say that you did tell them, you did inform them, you gave them all the context, you've been perfect in that respect or near perfect. That's fine. Like, you don't need to be permissive of everything, but then they didn't do what they were supposed to, even though you gave them the information. It's not your fault that they didn't follow it in that case. But if it keeps happening and you warn them a few times and it still continues to happen, now it's your fault again that they're doing it, because you probably do need to take more serious steps. Maybe you need to let them go, or maybe just have a sit down and a serious conversation with them. But in the end, it always comes back on you. And sometimes it's very easy for us to say, well, no, they should do their job. I'm paying them to do their job. And that's true in one respect, but having that attitude doesn't help you. And the reason why I'm just going to keep saying it's always your fault, it's always my fault, being the business owner, is that even if it is their fault, the buck stops with you. You're the one who's going to have to live with the outcome. If you're letting people just go around and do wrong things all the time, you're the one who's going to have to pay for it. It comes out of your profit at the end of the day. Even if you're able to get everybody to believe that, no, it was Susie's fault, it was John's fault, it was whoever's fault. Okay, maybe you convince everybody. Doesn't matter. You paid for it. You're going to keep paying for it. And then the other negative aspect is, now the people that are working for you, that are doing their job, are going to then just be worried all the time about you blaming them for something, because they notice that that's now your tendency. Because we don't want to think that people are going to behave like robots and just not act like social creatures and get affected by all this like negative attitude, negative talk, or pointing the finger, who did this, who did that. Especially if we're not really balancing it out with some positive reinforcement and giving commendation, or giving credit when they did something right. Like, one thing that I like to do every now and then is, when I'm planning to give somebody a raise, I like to actually just do it by surprise and kind of without telling them, because I feel like it's probably received even more positively than if I tell them that I'm going to on their next payment or something like that. Just because I want to give them like a positive feeling as well. I don't want it to be just about the money, because, well, then it never ends, and then the only way that you can increase their satisfaction is through money. And as we know from like psychological studies, that really loses its meaning the more the money increases. But one of the people who talks about this trait of accountability a lot is Jocko Willink, who was a ex-Navy SEAL, I believe, or a military commando, something like that. And he gives this story of one time that he took the blame for his whole team, even though maybe he wasn't directly involved in the bad decision or the mistake, but he decided to take the blame because he realized that in actuality it does always depend on him, because he was managing the team. But because he was willing to take the blame, and correct me if I'm getting the details wrong, but every person in the team then copied his attitude and tried to take accountability for their own actions. If we take that thought, that what if every team member or every company member took full accountability for their job or their department? That's usually what is the biggest complaint from owners about employees. They aren't taking ownership, they aren't taking an interest, they're not trying to be responsible for their role. I don't want to do that little bit extra, that's not my job, those types of attitudes. But if they take full ownership, then they're not going to act like that ever. They're going to go above and beyond, and they're actually going to be happy about doing so, because they feel like you will protect them and respect them, and so they want to do it because they want to be better, and they're following your example. And that story just really stuck in my mind. And so we won't always be perfect. Like, definitely not. There will be times where we'll get frustrated with employees or contractors. We won't say the right thing. We won't have the right attitude. But I'm trying to make that my goal, at least when I'm managing people and dealing with these relationships. I do want to have that kind of positive environment. I want to be a good leader and help them to not just do their job, but help them to actually become better so that eventually they can also be leaders if they want to and reflect those positive attributes. Because if we're just bossing everybody around all the time, that's not really an environment that anybody wants to be in. Like, I don't want to be micromanaging people. It's not fun for me. There's other things that I'd rather do, but then sometimes you feel like you have to micromanage people because they didn't do things exactly the way that they were supposed to. Like, maybe I know the design, obviously it should look like this because the examples looked like that. And so we need to imitate that and get it to the same caliber, the same quality level. It shouldn't look unpolished. It shouldn't have misspellings. It shouldn't have incorrect grammar in the copy. And yet people make these mistakes, right? And errors happen. Errors are always going to happen, even when you're very experienced. You know, I'm sure I send out typos in my emails, and yet they will happen less if the people that are working for us are taking accountability. They are taking ownership, but they are never ever going to be that way unless we do it first. Like, have you ever had a boss, maybe when you were working for someone, and they were really strict on your time, like when you show up, but they would show up late for things? Or even a friend or somebody that you know that was like that? Did it make you feel like you should keep doing that behavior or do that behavior less because you didn't feel like there was a mutual respect? Probably not, right? And while there is a difference in hierarchy when you are the owner of the company and you're hiring a contractor, like I definitely think that should be clear, that there is a hierarchy difference in that you are hiring them and they are supposed to fulfill certain requirements, which may be showing up at a specific time or working from this time to that time. So it's not that your responsibilities are the same, but it's more so that they will always sort of expect that you would be an example to them because you are the one who should care the most about this. And if you don't even care enough to show up on time, pay attention to the little details, be respectful, then they are going to start to just view it like a job, a set of tasks, not something that they want to actually care about themselves, not a company that they want to see do really well. And one aspect of it that I think is probably an even deeper one is that you also grow to respect yourself even more. You kind of view yourself more so as someone strong enough to take on the burdens of others. Somebody who, even when other people are making mistakes, you don't need to call them out on every single little thing. You are just trying to help everybody do well, take all the responsibility. You don't need to, micromanage people and make them feel bad about every little thing and then take all the good credit when it's your opportunity. You're actually looking for opportunities to give them more credit whenever they do something worthy of credit. And I think that's when you can really start to come into your own as being comfortable leading other people and helping them to be better. Over the last 7 to 10 years, I've been working with contractors, 7 years in the marketing agency, and then for a few years before that, while I was still working jobs and then doing some freelancing outside of it, I would sometimes subcontract out some work. And so I haven't managed like tons and I haven't managed 100 people or anything. I think at this point I've probably gone through working with 30 people over that time. And every one that you work with is another opportunity for a learning experience, right? And you meet all these different types of personalities, different types of work behaviors, people with different levels of goals, many job interviews, so you see how people act that seem like they're going to be like this, but then they turn out to be like that. And over time, you have to grow sort of a thicker skin to be able to just keep kind of working through it and learning how to act yourself. Like Gary Vee has this good quote, hiring is guessing and firing is knowing. And I think that makes a lot of sense, because you will hire somebody, but their job interview version of themselves is like them on their best behavior. It's their most impressive version, because they want you to think the best of them. And then there's a very limited time that they have to present that. And so they act different, right? But then right afterwards, you realize, okay, this person, yeah, they have problems and they seemed like they're amazing, but they do make these mistakes here and there. And then you kind of figure out, are you going to be able to work with it? Does the good outweigh the bad? If you decide to fire them, hopefully it's because now you know this isn't going to work out for this team. It's not a good fit, or they just don't have the experience yet to handle what we need. But that's your experience relating to the different personality types and work ethic types. Whereas the accountability trait is something that you have to develop on yourself, independent of how they are. It's just such an important character trait to have. It's also just going to help you in your personal life. I mean, people love responsible people. They know that they can trust them. They know that they can rely on them. And who doesn't want to work for or with somebody who is very responsible, and you never have to worry about them blaming you for things? They're always trying to give you the benefit of the doubt and say that they could have done more. Working with people like that is just so nice. It's very rare to find nowadays, unfortunately, but man, is it nice when it happens. As an entrepreneur, you know what it's like to wake up every morning and have to face problems, whether it's new problems, old problems, bigger problems. It doesn't matter. You're always dealing with problems. And so because of that, I want to share with you the number one thing that has been able to help me to solve problems, no matter how hard they are, or whether I've even encountered them ever before. In both programming and in marketing and my business overall, all the time, I'm just dealing with all kinds of problems. And so this one thing that has helped me so much is really simple, but it kind of just comes from a programming principle. And that is, no matter how hard the problem is, as long as you just read it line by line, which essentially means to break it down into its smallest components, then you can finally tackle the problem and solve it, no matter how difficult it is. Even if you don't even know where to start, the best thing to do is just to break it down into the smallest crumbs that you can figure out. Using this principle, I was able to solve problems that nobody else in my development team or company at the time was able to solve. And I think that's because I'm just really determined when it comes to solving hard problems. I don't think it was that I was particularly smarter. I just would stick with it and just keep working on it, chunking it down bit by bit until I could really understand everything about it. And then the problem was already solved. So maybe we could walk through an example as to what this would look like in a typical business setting. We're not just going to talk about development examples. And so let's say you're trying to figure out what's wrong with sales right now. Why is it that sales have been increasing for the last 4 months and then suddenly this month they're down? Well, we could start by breaking this down into its smaller components. What exactly happened? Did we have less orders? Did we have lower ticket values on our orders? See, this is a very basic step, right? But just by being a little bit more specific, we're now breaking up the big problem. Because if we just say something as simple as what happened with sales, that's quite ambiguous. We could go in 100 different directions with that. So let's just start by categorizing it. Was it the quantity of orders? Was it the size of those orders? Is there some sort of economic issue? Did we have a sales department issue? Did we do less outbound? And by being so specific, then we can really get to the roots of the issue. The other problem with leaving things too ambiguous is that it creates a lot of uncertainty, and this uncertainty creates more stress. And then that stress creates more uncertainty around all of the other tasks. And then before you know it, you're not working on anything. You don't know where to start on anything. And so you just end up wasting a ton of time. And I know I've done this so many times that I hate looking back on the times that I did it. But what if your brain is already just kind of messy, and so you really can't figure out even how to break things down? Well, one thing that has helped me to actually do that is writing. And this would be writing, but in whatever way you don't normally write. Now for me, typically I'm writing on the computer, typing, and so then I switch the context or the medium, and then I start writing on a notepad. And this helps me to kind of get my thoughts out and then examine them a little bit more objectively. And then I can read back exactly what I thought at that moment multiple times over. And then I can start to identify exactly what it is that I'm either concerned about or the part that seemed more uncertain. And so now I've kind of chunked out a little bit of that problem. I've broken that problem up into smaller bits. And this is just the first step that you can take into it. Another way that you can try to break the problem up is by explaining the problem to someone else. And as you're talking about it, usually you can actually pop up with a few solutions in your mind, or even realize actually this isn't that big of a problem in the first place. This is quite similar to what is referred to as the Feynman technique, and that is by teaching someone something that you have recently learned, you will then be able to remember it much better and actually understand it at a greater level than you already did. For example, whenever I was dealing with extremely hard coding problems that I had just been racking my brain around for many hours, I would just have another developer come and just listen to me. And I would just start explaining the problem and why it's a problem and why it's not working. And then suddenly the solution just pops up into my head, even though they hadn't said anything yet. And so we want to use these different techniques in order to just break up these problems, because the hardest part is the ambiguity. And that ambiguity delays us from actually taking action. Because we notice that once we get started, like once we spend at least 5-10 minutes usually on a problem, we have a much greater level of understanding of it than before, when we were just thinking about, today's the day, I've got to work on that thing that I really don't want to work on it. I've been procrastinating. I've been pushing it off until later because I don't even know what to do about it. But if we can just take one little bite out of it, usually the rest of it is just going to fall apart. And that's just one principle that honestly, it has been a game changer for me when I actually am trying to figure it out. You know, in programming, I would have to deal with so many hard problems all the time. And that has carried over into business, in that we face problems all the time that we've never encountered before. And there aren't many clear answers. Like recently, I was looking for some types of animation, but it wasn't just normal animation like a cartoon, but it's kind of like a 3D rendering, and it's kind of like a movie, but I didn't know exactly what this terminology is called. And I would ask designers and I would ask developers, and none of them know what that specific type of graphics are called. But I just kept asking more designers and just saying, hey, what do you think this is called? How would I refer to this? And just ask more specific questions, because people would just say very typical things like animation. But then eventually I got a different answer. And then not only did that person know the answer, but they actually already knew somebody who did that specific type of work, so that I could finally get what I wanted to be made. Now, that wouldn't be a very hard problem, as I'm sure you're probably thinking, but it's just an example of a problem that comes up in business, because in reality, all of the problems seem easy after you've solved them, but until you solve them, they are just a big question mark. Another problem might be, how are we going to write the copy for this landing page? Like, what do we write? Do we do the design first? Do we do the copywriting first? It's just all ambiguous. And so, again, you just need to consult with many people. Just start with a simple Google search. Is it better to write copy first, or is it better to do the design first? And you will get differing opinions. But then once you've read 10 articles, you're probably gonna get kind of an inkling as to what side of the argument probably makes the most sense for you. But it all starts by just taking that first step, breaking it down. Again, I'm just gonna keep hammering it home. Breaking the problem down into smaller pieces, ask simple questions, but try to be specific so that you can figure out where to go next. Which crumb are you going to latch on to next? This could also be referred to as chunking. Like some people would refer to it as like chunking down the problems. But as simple as this is, I think that thinking this way is really, really important. And it helps you to keep your momentum because you want to keep your feedback cycles very quick so that you can make incremental improvements on your system as a whole. Even if it's not software development like my previous experience, but maybe it's just in your business or landing page optimization or the ads efficiency, it doesn't matter. Just incremental improvements require momentum. And that in order to keep that momentum, you want to keep solving these problems on a regular basis. Now, not every day is going to be a breakthrough moment, but if you have this habit of being able to solve difficult problems, then you're going to do great in business. Today, I'm going to be talking about why in business you should always be the bigger person and why it ends up paying off in the end. So a little story about this. I had a family member that went to get their nails done. They went to this nail shop in particular instead of their normal nail shop because it was close by to their home and there was a deal that they saw. So they went there, and before they got started with anything serious, they of course double checked, is this the deal that I'm getting? This is what I want. This is how much I want to pay. They said, yeah, no problem. As I'm sure you can imagine, by the time they finished, suddenly the price was about two and a half times more than what they said. And of course, then it becomes a debate. Well, actually you wanted this. Well, no, but I double checked with you that this is what I'm getting, so on. I'm sure you can imagine what the conversation is like, because I think we've all kind of experienced that type of a thing before. I ended up being there and I was listening to this go on, and then suddenly they said one thing that made me just think, this is pointless, let's go, just pay the money, just don't come back, this is a dumb waste of time. And the thing that they said was, well, if that's not what you wanted, then we can just take it off. And I'm thinking, you want to be right so badly that you will actually take this product that has now been wasted back off the person's body in order to prove that you are right. Now, am I saying that you should give away free product all the time to every person? No, of course not. But in this case, I know the person. They just simply would not have gone if they didn't know that the price was going to be this instead of that. And they tried to double check in advance. But this nail shop owner or manager or whatever, they wanted to be right so badly that they would rather lose the money and lose the client and waste the nail polish or whatever it was than let the customer feel like they got something extra. They didn't want to be wronged. And while I understand that, like if they truly believed that this person was being dishonest with them, okay. But this was also the first time that the person was going there. How often is it that we run special deals to get customers in for cheaper? Now, who was right in the matter, I don't really care about. The family member was right about whether they were supposed to get the deal or not, or the manager or whatever was right about whether they weren't. I don't really care because it's like, we're talking about like 20 bucks here. It's not really that important. The attitude, where turning a bad situation into a good situation would have been actually quite easy. So for example, one really easy way that she could have actually made the family member an ongoing customer, especially because it's close, could have been to say, well, you know what, it really was a misunderstanding. I understand that maybe you misunderstood, or maybe we didn't communicate clearly enough. But you know what, this time I can't do that full discount for you because we have costs, but I can meet you in the middle and we can get to here with that, and I can give you a discount this one time. I just can't do that much of a discount. And that would have been fine. That would have been very appropriate and would have made it a much more positive experience. Whereas now it's like, I'm never going back there. I can't stand that place. That person was so mean. That person was so rude. Saying that they'll take it back off my nails. What kind of business is this? It's just very short-term thinking. Now, of course, if you live in some neighborhood where people are coming by to scam you all the time, I suppose you'll have to take a different strategy. You can't do that there, but this isn't that kind of place, right? And so it's just a bad strategy. And now I don't know how many nail shop owners are listening into this video. I don't expect any, but who knows? But even if you're not a nail shop owner, you need to just get in that mindset of what's the best for the long term, as opposed to trying to like get mine on every transaction. You don't want to go to the opposite side and then start giving everything away for free as a loss leader for getting future business. You need to have a balance, but definitely don't have this short term, I want to have everything, I'm going to squeeze every penny out of this opportunity as I can. Even if you work in the same company as that person, you don't want to be there. You just feel bad working with people like that. Whereas people who are more generous and who try to give more end up receiving more in general in the long run anyways. Now, if you give away too much, it doesn't work. But if you give away some that you are known for being generous, people do end up reciprocating. Just don't give away everything you have. It doesn't work then. The system doesn't work then. Like one example that we see of this that works is lead magnets. If a lead magnet is of higher value and of higher value and of higher value, yeah, you are putting a lot of industry expertise that's going into this product. But think about what the person's mindset is going to be when they feel all the work that came through in this free product or this heavily discounted product. They see that you give this away for $10. What's your $100 thing like? That must be life-changing. And so if we just have that mindset of generosity, then it's just going to keep multiplying our business, and not just multiplying the business, but improving the retention. Just like a nail shop is a great place to get recurring business because women always want it done, and it's very high margin. At least the materials are very high margin. I don't know the economics around the labor for it. I don't imagine it's extremely high cost. But if they just had a good retention model, then it's a money machine, right? And yet, here they are wasting opportunities and doing things to mess up retention on a fairly high profit margin business. It just doesn't make sense. And we see things like this all the time in the different ways that people are handling aspects of their business, whether it's showing up on time, doing a little bit extra work, not necessarily always giving a better price, because I think that if you charge more, then people are going to value it more. But in this case, it was based on price in the first place. So then, of course, it always becomes a debate about price. So that's why I just don't even like getting to the price conversation if I can in the first place. But there's so many other aspects which I've covered in other videos that you can express more quality and put yourself above other companies by escalating the brand. It's just so easy to be generous, and you actually feel good while you're doing it, and people like working with you. They know that every time they work with you, they will have a good feeling afterwards. And that's even without just the quality of the product, but just the way that you treat them throughout the transaction. It's just so interesting. It's a way for us to kind of take advantage of our human nature of feeling good when we give things, but it's a good thing. We're taking advantage, but it's a good thing for them and for us. They will pay us more often, and we will feel good. Now, I've been in many stressful situations, especially when it comes to money. When I first started out in my marketing journey and having to learn the skills, I was negative $5,000, and then I went all the way up to generating millions and millions of dollars for my clients, and of course did very well for myself as well. In this video, I'm going to be talking about a different way of thinking about money that has really helped me in both my business life and my personal life, just make better decisions overall. But the belief that I'll be talking about today that was so helpful to me to get out of that initial situation and get into a much better situation and to still be able to make clear decisions is neutrality towards money. It is something that I learned from actually a video here on YouTube that has to do with trading. I'm going to put a link to the video in the description. The video is over 2 hours long. It has a little bit of a clickbaity title, 10 Secrets to Achieve Financial Success, but it's actually really good, so I do recommend that you watch the whole thing. That was just one of the tips that I was able to learn from it, but it really affected me quite deeply. And so what does this mean to be neutral towards money? Well, it's basically like viewing it as a tool and nothing more. And you might think that, well, yeah, I don't fantasize about money. I don't think too much of it. I know that family is more important. I know that there are much more important things in life than money. That's good, and that is definitely getting part of the point. But the other part is really that we in modern society tend to view money as kind of like a variable. We see it and then we immediately start thinking of the things that we could get with it. Now, this is true. You can assign a variable to it and think of it like many other things. Like in the video, the man says, oh, well, $100 is equivalent to like a night out. And the teacher asks the person that he's mentoring, what do you think of it? What do you think of it? And then he keeps answering these different things that he could buy with the money. And so then he asks back, well, what do you think the money thinks of you? And then he says, well, nothing, of course. And he says, right, isn't that interesting that you think so many things? And I'm interpreting a little bit because I don't want to just quote him, because otherwise you might as well just watch the video. But basically the point is, you're assigning so many different things and interpretations to this thing that is inanimate. It has no thoughts. It is just a physical object, or in some cases a digital number. What is the bad part of having all of those mental assignments to things of this money? Well, it can kind of get your imagination to run wild. For example, if we visualize losing $1,000, $5,000, we start to think, I could have used it for this, I could have used it for that. And again, it's true, you could have used it for these other things, but because you're visualizing the money as the thing that you could have bought with it, you now have a deeper pain. You feel like you lost the thing. And this can be very harmful in business, because you could be thinking about making a $10,000 investment. And then you start, instead of viewing the investment on its own merits of, is this going to generate a good ROI for its amount, you start thinking, oh, but I could buy a car, or I could have gone on a vacation, or I could have bought this piece of equipment, or whatever you are into. And this can be very distracting, and it can sort of hinder your decision making and make you a little bit more emotional, because you're being somewhat reactive if you are thinking in this way. Like one way that has helped me to, and maybe it's kind of funny, because the term money can be a little bit more exciting. Instead, we just think the equivalent amount of currency, but in the form of beans. Well, now it becomes a little bit easier to view it without emotion, because I don't think any of us are too excited about having a really big bean collection, right? Now, sometimes we should probably be upset about losing money or investing this amount of money and not getting the right return, but we need to have this ability to kind of neutralize any sort of feelings that come with it. Because if we make a mistake in business, which is going to happen, but then we sort of keep punishing ourselves by continually thinking about, oh, I could have gotten this, I could have done that, I could have had this, then it's just kind of reopening the wound over and over again, which is not necessary. In business, there's going to be many expenses that come up, or things that you have to pay for, like emergency overnight shipping because your manufacturer was late to prepare this piece of the product, and so now it's delayed you, but to get it to the customer on time, you have to pay extra and get it to them still. And so then it can be kind of frustrating. Oh man, we had to pay $500 of shipping just for this $200 item because somebody else made a mistake. Or maybe you have to replace a printer that an employee broke, and so you're thinking, because of that person's mistake, now it's cost me this, because you're immediately viewing it as the money and then converting it to the thing that you could have bought with it. And I feel like this is quite freeing, because then you're able to sort of just factor many things into it as like a cost of doing business. Whereas if you just looked at it from a balance sheet or a cash flow projection software, then you'd be able to view it a little bit more objectively, and it'd become a lot less upsetting. And if you're able to then step back and make all these decisions in a much more neutral way, isn't it likely that you're going to make better decisions? I know in my case, it's helped me a lot to step back and just be able to view it as objectively as possible. And this has carried over from not just my business life, but also into my personal life. Something ends up costing more than it should have, or you have to make a surprise payment for something. It just makes things so much easier. And then because it makes them easier, you're just gonna make better choices, like I said, and then you're just gonna do better overall. One thing that might be hard to understand about this is also that it helps you to associate with people above your pay grade. People who are doing really, really well don't want to be dealing with people who are freaking out about the dollar amounts that they're throwing out. For example, maybe you have a friend that makes much more than you, but then if you start saying, how can you pay so much for that? I only pay for this. Or how can you do that? Why are you spending so much on that? That person is not going to keep spending time with the other because they just don't get it. Because in the scheme of things, really nobody spends that much money. There's people with billions of dollars in the world, and there's people with less than $1 in the world. So really it's all just relative. Even people who think that they're poor, they're really not that poor in comparison with the poorest people in the world, right? We should probably all be a little bit more neutral. We shouldn't think that the people that are spending much more than us are just ridiculous, because in reality, we are those people to other people. And so if we have this neutral mindset, we're going to be a lot more flexible in the people that we can spend time with, and that they are not going to become uncomfortable with dealing with us. People who are doing really well don't want to keep spending time with people that don't view things from a bigger frame of mind. So it's really going to open you up to a lot more opportunities and help you to get better clients, better friends, better associates overall. So there's really just not much downside to developing a more neutral mindset. What you'll also notice on the contrary is that typically people who are very emotional about money tend to end up with not that much of it, or at the most a few $1,000,000, but that is really the max level that they're able to ever get to. If we think of books like The Millionaire Next Door, then there's people that are really like that they really scrounge every penny together, and that's it. That is their maximum. Now, is it good to be conservative with your funds and not wasteful? Absolutely. But if it's coming from a place of scaredness, as opposed to an abundance mindset, which actually is quite helpful and is going to open your mind up to a lot more opportunities, then shouldn't we be shooting for that? Now, this is a thing that probably many people are not going to understand, but if we're trying to become successful in our business and in our overall lives, we're going to be quite an exception. We don't want to view things in the same way that most people do. Sometimes business owners can really undervalue their time by doing too many things, the wrong types of things, and then delegating the wrong things and then having to fix those things. So let's just break it down step by step today. And hopefully this will help you to be able to not make the same mistakes that I have absolutely made in the past. So the first thing is not doing tasks that are below your hourly wage. Now, many of you might be familiar with this concept as you've started to earn more and more money per hour. Maybe you started out as a freelancer, then you were able to charge higher rates. Then you started subcontracting some of your work out to other people, and then you've been able to benefit from the arbitrage. Then you moved into like more of a business owner role. So you're probably familiar with this, but in reality, this can then cross over into other aspects of your life. Like, are you going out and doing odd tasks like picking up laundry, making your own food, going to the DMV yourself? All of these things are things that are not directly involved in your business, but they are opportunities for you to save money by arbitraging your hourly rate for the other person's hourly rate. For example, maybe you could have been saving a ton of money on your groceries by paying more for your groceries, because in reality, if you go and spend 2 to 3 hours per week buying groceries as a business owner, but you could have been making $300 per hour when you factor in the leverage that your business gets from you operating it, then it's kind of a crazily expensive grocery trip, right? For example, if you go to the DMV instead of a private registration agent or whatever you call them, but you know what I mean, I hope. But basically, the places where you can go to get your paperwork done for a slightly higher fee, but there's nobody there waiting in the line. And so you can save yourself a ton of time, hours potentially, and just pay like $10 more and then get back to operating your business. Because everything in business really has an opportunity cost. When you invest in this, you're using funds for this, so now you can't use it for that. So we need to remember that when we're doing more normal things or typical things that could have potentially saved us a lot of money in our business. And not to mention the focus aspect of it, because the more time that we're able to use on the business instead of other random tasks, the better we're going to get at our business. If, for example, you're a real estate agent and your hourly wage ends up to be about $200 an hour, you need to really figure out what are the tasks that I can then delegate so that I can get back to making $200 an hour. Now, just a warning, when you start to see things this way, it can be very tempting to do that and start tasking out everything to other people, but then you have to make sure you actually do fill those hours back in with more work. I've definitely done this myself where I paid extra for things thinking that, oh, well, now I can work an extra 2 hours instead of spending 2 hours on that. And then if we don't go and work for the 2 hours, we didn't save any money, we just paid more and now we're being lazy, right? So we have to make sure that we're then gonna get back to revenue generating opportunities or high leverage activities. Maybe we're hiring people, in some cases firing people, or maybe we're selling. But whatever it is that is important for you in the business, that is your primary function as the founder or owner or manager, whatever you are, we need to make sure we get back to that as soon as we get rid of these other things. We also need to make sure that we're continuing to climb that value ladder and tasking out the tasks that are inside the business that maybe we really like doing or we're pretty good at. But if we're able to now task it out just because the business is doing well enough to be able to hire for it, we can't get too cocky or arrogant to think that, no, I'm the only one who can do this. No, in reality, if you can hire somebody for less than it costs for you to do, it makes sense to do it. We don't want to be so stuck in our ways that we're not adaptable. The value of the CEO or the founder is so much more than just doing a high income task. It is making sure that many people are doing high income tasks. So let's not just value ourselves based on our skill in that one aspect. You have so many things to offer. You've worn all the hats in the business most likely, so everybody already knows that you have that value. You just need to now continue to climb that ladder. I'm not going to say that you need to get to a level where you aren't working in the business at all, because I don't think that it's good to just not work. Maybe you're different and you want that. If you can do it, by all means, go ahead and do it. Today, I'm going to be talking about pricing strategies and why you should probably stop discounting and maybe even raise your prices. So first, I'm just going to tell a short story of an experience that I had with a client. In this particular niche, their product was priced around, let's say, $9,000 per unit. I believed that compared to their competitors, this was too low and it was actually hurting their brand value. Now, if we think of the typical law of supply and demand, we believe that the lower the price, the more people can buy it. The higher the price, the less people can buy it. So typically, the higher you price something, the less sales you might make. It just has a curve to it, right, on a chart. But this does not really apply if the price itself implies value, which we know from price psychology that it absolutely does affect the way people perceive the product. Now, if it's priced too low, then it's going to affect your sales actually. It's not going to follow the typical price curve. Like I said, compared to their competitors, I believe that their product should be much higher, maybe even higher than their competitors. But we had disagreements. So instead, I proposed that we run a test. We run Facebook ads with their current pricing, 20% higher, 40% higher, 100% higher, just to see what happens, what type of interest or what type of response do we get at these different pricing levels, because they were afraid that if we were to increase the prices just across the board, then they would lose their sales, and they don't want to have that happen, of course. But what ended up happening in actuality? Well, 12,000 ended up performing slightly worse than their typical cost per lead. But I would argue it's still worth it, because now you have weeded out any of the potential people that were just tire kickers or just browsing or just trying to see the price. Whereas now you're getting people that already know this price is here, so they've already kind of accepted that pricing just by even clicking on the ad. Now, the 40% and the 100% higher, that was very interesting, because the 40% higher was actually cheaper than their normal cost per lead. And the 100% higher was even cheaper per lead. How on earth does that work, right? You double the price of something, but you get leads for cheaper for it? Well, it does make sense if we assume that the price was initially set too low, that it was actually hurting the perceived value of the product. See, this is why I just love experimenting, especially with paid ads, because you can you mitigate your risk by only showing it to a select few, but you do get reliable data because you're using your same targeting that you would use for your normal advertising. So I highly recommend trying something like this out, especially if you're not sure where your pricing should be in relation to your competitors. You don't want to assume that because your features are similar to your competitors that you should be at the same level, because the price itself could actually affect whether people perceive you as the premium or the luxury or the high-end version of the industry. Of course, if you price your product too high and then it does not meet expectations, then it's not going to work and you're just going to have people feeling a little bit ripped off after they've bought it. But what about discounting? What does that do? Well, you do kind of give somebody a temporary satisfaction of them feeling like they got something out of it, like there was a compromise. But I would argue that in most scenarios, people just want to feel like they got a good deal. It doesn't have to be in the form of a discount. You might experience a much more positive reaction by instead giving a bonus, especially if you perhaps have things that the cost for you is very low, or is just another one of your products that has a similar profit margin. As long as it's not going to destroy your profit from the first one, it's actually better to give the discount in the form of a product. Like, let's say you could discount 10% off the product, or you could give them another product that will end up being around a total 10% discount. But I think that this is much better because you have not hurt the perceived brand value by cheapening the first product, but you're still giving them a positive experience by giving them something, and they now have an additional opportunity to like the quality of the products that your business offers. So I really think that that strategy works a lot better, unless of course it's just something that they don't care about. An additional benefit that I just remembered is actually that if you then offer them the bonus instead of the discount, and then they say, no, I don't care about that bonus, I'm not interested in that, then you say, oh, okay, then I can give you the discount. But now the conversation has shifted from are you going to buy or not to which offer do you want? Would you like the bonus or would you like the discount? And I think that's a cool like structural thing or framing thing, that now you've changed the conversation to a different type of conversation, and hopefully a more positive one, and also keeping your brand status or perceived value at a high level. So I really like that, and so I try to apply it whenever I can, or recommend it whenever I can. So I hope that you could try something like that out in your business when you have the chance. Today I'm going to be talking about why you probably need to be marketing yourself more, and that is most likely the thing that is holding your business back from doing more business with better clients at much better rates. Now, the underlying principle of this, and one that was the biggest sort of learning point for me, especially as an initially quite introverted type of person, is that it doesn't really matter how great your product is if nobody knows about it. And actually, it's quite an injustice to the world if your product is great and nobody knows about it. One thought that I used to have is that, well, if I ever really need to market myself, then I can always just do it later. And this is true, you can definitely do it later, but I think you're going to be surprised once you finally start at how long it really takes. It's a lot more work than most people expect. Some people are worried about marketing their product because they think other people are going to take their ideas, when in actuality, you'll be very fortunate to even have anybody pay attention to your ideas. And that is why we recommend to start sooner than later. It takes a really, really long time. That's why marketing is known for not being the easiest industry. It's quite stressful, it's a lot of work, and the rewards can be great, but the rewards usually go to the best people in the game. So unless you're already one of those people, you should probably just start earlier and make up for the lack of experience or talent with just a large volume of effort. But the great thing is, as you continue to produce a higher volume of content over a sustained period of time, you're just going to get better at it, which means eventually you'll be good enough that you can work a little bit less while still getting the leverage of being good at marketing. Another aspect of getting started earlier is that the longer you've been doing it, the more people are going to view your brand as higher value. If you think about a company that you know, like a Ford Motor Company or Berkshire Hathaway, whatever the company is, one that's been in business for a very long time, you're going to trust it just naturally a bit more that it's legitimate than a company that's only been around for 2 years. Now, a company might say it's been around for 20 years, but isn't it quite different of a feeling that you get if you've actually seen their brand around for 20 years? Something to think about. So the longer you've been branding yourself or your company or your product, the more benefit you are going to get in the long run. Again, it's hard. You're gonna get better at it though. So it's just better to start sooner. This is especially true with a personal brand where it's very competitive nowadays, but the great aspect of a personal brand is that there's only one you. So you might as well take advantage of that and try to start standing out a little bit earlier. Now you might think, well, I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be well known. And I had that thought as well. But in reality, it's more like a person who says that I don't want to start going to the gym and lifting weights. I'm going to get too big. I have good genetics. Maybe that's true. But the other nice part is, if that does happen, if you are one of those outliers that has this amazing response right away to your groundbreaking marketing that you just learned, you can always bring it back down later. If you're suffering from too many leads, please talk to me. I'd love to help you out. But that is not likely to be most of us. I know that didn't happen for me right away. You also might have some strategies in mind if you're thinking that way, that, this is what I'll do if I ever need to start marketing myself more. If my word of mouth marketing is not enough, then this is what I'll do. But in actuality, you don't have the experience yet to do that. And I'm not calling you out, but at this moment, it's just an assumption. And you might have actually been right. But the problem is things change. Like we used to have MySpace. Facebook used to have a lot of organic reach. TikTok was really big and now it's at risk of going away. So you can't really know which marketing channel is going to be the best one 5 years from now. So if you're planning on starting 5 years from now, it doesn't make sense to make those kinds of predictions, right? The other thing about word of mouth, which is great, if you are getting lots of word of mouth traffic and you're getting good referrals from that and people are very happy with your product, enough so that they are telling other people about it, you're in a really good position, but you'd still benefit from additional marketing. Now, you might think that the word of mouth is great, but do you really want to 100% rely on the work ethic and the memory and the marketing efforts of another person that is not directly invested in the well-being of your business? Probably not. The other problem with it is just that it's not 100% reliable. You might get a lot of word of mouth reference for a season, and then in the next you don't because people aren't thinking of it at that moment. But if you are able to branch out of your typical marketing channels and then build up something like a paid ads funnel or a landing page or some organic SEO or paid search, whatever it is, if you just have something that you are able to control as a business, then that's going to help you a lot more, especially more so if you are a new business who doesn't have enough initial customers to even gain that kind of word of mouth traffic. Maybe your product is great, you just haven't had enough people to then benefit from the law of large numbers by then those people telling other people, because not everybody is going to talk about your business because people have other things to do than market for us, right? So we shouldn't be overly dependent on that. After all, we're the business owners, we've got to do the marketing, the majority of the marketing ourselves. Now, should we also try to make sure our products are amazing so that people want to tell other people about them? Yes, by all means, keep pursuing that. But doing additional marketing besides your word of mouth is not going to hurt you, right? And I don't think anybody else is worried about making too much money. And if you are, then I don't really know what you're doing. But good for you. I've run into a few different companies that thought that they did not need to market themselves, and then they end up having to do so later on in a much more hurried of an effort. People that did not seem concerned with replying and getting projects going, being able to do their marketing, and then later on, now they don't have leads, which, shocker, right? So none of us want to be in that position. And I definitely don't encourage being overly dependent on one or two marketing channels. You should always try to get a few more after you've got one that's really solid, that is under your control. Do you need to do 10 at once? No, absolutely not. I would recommend going ahead with just one marketing channel, like a Facebook ads or a Google ads, just so that even if you're so busy you can't produce organic content on a regular basis, which, I mean, you should definitely produce organic content, but this is one that is then independent. You just put $10 in, you get $20 back. That's the goal for the paid marketing channels. Whereas with organic, it can fluctuate based on algorithms, and it also depends on the quality of the content that you put in. So the paid advertising is a lot more stable. It puts less stress on you as the business owner because you don't have to then prepare more things for it, but it's stable and very, very scalable. Like, for example, you could absolutely scale just one advertising channel up to $1 million a year, depending on the type of business, maybe even $1 million a month, without really needing to go onto another channel. We're going to be talking about things to watch out for if you're an entrepreneur, mistakes that you can make, mistakes I've made, and mistakes that I've seen lots of people close by to me make. The first one is focusing on the wrong things. Now, it can be very tempting to go after every rabbit we think we can chase, especially when we are people that like to solve problems. We like to go for it. We like to make sales, get things done, but we only have 24 hours in a day, and anything that distracts us from our primary goal is really just gonna make more of a mess, and it's gonna make us worse at the first goal that we had. So really, how many primary goals can we have? Think about it. Not really much more than one, right? You can't head in more than one direction at once. The best way you can is by delegating. But if your focus for the business is in too many places, then where is the business going? So we really just need to not waste time. No, we don't want to do too many ventures at once. And I understand I'm 100% a hypocrite for this. I have done this so many times, but it is also the number one thing that has held me back from doing better. Every time that I have then consolidated or focused into just one aspect, or even just less aspects, like going down from 4 things to 2 things, I end up doing way better. But it's not just me, we see it all over the place. Whenever a business gets too scattered in its priorities, it starts doing worse. The quality of the product suffers. People don't like it anymore. I used to come here for how great the burgers were, but the burgers aren't that great anymore because now they make chicken burgers and waffles and blah, blah, blah. And this is always the case. Now, you can branch out over a very long period of time. If we think about something like Apple, they started out with just a few products, they keep building, but they stick to their own schedule. And by sticking to that schedule, they're able to keep their initial projects running at the same quality. Like, it's not typical that Apple has issues with its product quality, and that's because they've continued doing it over a set schedule for a long period of time. Even entrepreneurs that I know, I've watched them, I've seen them, and I've told them, don't do that, that's too many things. Are you sure you're gonna be able to handle that many things at once? And then they end up getting no traction from it. So I don't want you to be the same way. I know we're all like this because we like solving problems, and so we see another problem to solve and we try to go for it. Or a client will ask us, hey, do you also sell this? And then we say yes, because we want to go ahead and make another sale. But in actuality, it's hurting us in the long run. So just, we need to try and focus on what we came here to do, which is to solve problem number 1. The second and the third things are delegating too early and delegating too late. Now, in the case of delegating too early, this is definitely something that I have done myself. So for example, I was at one point making about $10,000 a month. And so I felt comfortable with taking on some additional help to get contractors that were handling either design or some basic development. But the problem was I wasn't that good at hiring yet. So I took on a few people that were at a lower cost because they were working overseas. And at first it was okay, it was slightly helpful, but in reality, I should have been continuing to churn through different contractors until I was able to find people working at the quality that was actually going to really help me. But instead, I thought it was a workload problem as opposed to a work quality problem. So I hired more people. And so eventually I was making $10,000 a month still, but not really getting much profit out of it. And I didn't want to fire people that I had brought on because I would always blame myself, as we are supposed to in entrepreneurship, because we are the leaders. And so I would wait too long to get rid of them until I couldn't keep them anymore because I was making no money. I've also seen this happen to various business owners that I've worked with, in which they handed off key tasks that really they should have been handling themselves until they were able to find adequate enough talent. They would hand it over to new people that they thought knew what they were doing, and unfortunately they didn't know what they were doing, so then the business revenue started to decline, and then of course it's too late. Bad things are already happening. Now you've got to also fire this person or put them in a new department that they're better suited for. Try to fix that lost revenue and get it increasing again. So you don't want to do it too early. You really want to be thorough, especially with those early hires, because they're going to affect the culture, the quality of your product in its most nascent or baby state. And so you want to get that quality really, really high when you're still small, because as you get bigger in an organization, things are just going to get more and more diluted, and that dilution is just going to, what do you want to dilute? Something that was started out really good or something that started out kind of mediocre. And then that brings us to delegating too late. Now, this is something that really needs to be taken on a case-by-case basis. For example, if you are becoming sort of the bottleneck for your business because you are really good at sales, but your ego is tied up in that you're really good at sales, and so you are just losing out on potential revenue all the time because you want to be the one who brings in the money, then that's just going to hurt yourself in the long run. In reality, even if you do hire somebody on and they're only able to achieve maybe 70% of what you could, well, that's now 70% of your result, but the majority of the benefit is still going to you, and now you don't have to work that time. So you'd probably be better off hiring 2 of those people, getting 140% of your initial results, but now you don't have to do any of that work. You can now move up the ladder back into more of a founder role and work on higher leverage activities, like hiring other people that do this type of work. Now you are bringing in much more revenue than you ever were in your initial sales role. But like I said, you don't want to delegate too early. If you're really good at sales and you need more help in fulfillment, then hire fulfillment first. You don't want to hire people for sales first and then fulfillment. Stay good at sales, keep bringing in tons of revenue, and backfill into the fulfillment side of things. And the next one is quite similar to the first point of focusing on the wrong things, but this one is doing too many things. So you might be focusing on many different initiatives that are related to your primary focus, but if you're doing too many things at once or hiring too many people at once, it's just going to go bad. Just like focusing on the wrong things, you can't do that many things at once. Multitasking is really a myth. And so you want to be able to concentrate your energy as the founder or the leader and just use it all on the things that are going to drive the business forward. The next point, I think, is going to be more suited for early stage founders, but it could also apply to some late stage founders. And this would be to just make money. Don't worry about fancy terms and buzzwords like ideal customer fit or ideal customer profile or things like that. You just need to keep selling. If you're getting started, you should actually sell to the wrong people so that you can figure out why they're the wrong people. And then from that, you're going to figure out, oh, these types of people work the best. But you would never know that unless you were comparing them to the wrong people. You don't need to have everything perfectly dialed in before you've even made a sale. So just get selling, sell to everybody that will buy it from you, because that is the first problem, and then refine it as you go. It's already hard enough to sell lots of people, and it's only going to be even harder if you're trying to sell to the perfect people before you've built up enough brand value over time. Which leads me into the last point, which is don't over optimize too early, because it's quite similar to the last one that I just mentioned, but man, there are so many people who are trying to find the perfect customers, set up the perfect systems, the perfect hiring process. And man, it is so hard to even get things perfect when you've been doing it for 10 years. So how on earth would you be able to get things perfectly done before you've even started? So don't worry about it so much. You need to make the mistakes. They're the cost of tuition in reality, which are going to get you to the level of being an experienced entrepreneur who doesn't make that many mistakes. And guess what? As soon as you solve those problems, you're gonna then have other problems when you get to a higher level. So stop worrying about getting everything perfect. just try not to screw up too badly. Just focus on not making too big of mistakes, and then things should be okay. So just don't worry about making things perfect. You're not gonna get it perfect. And if you think you've got it perfect, you definitely got it wrong. So just keep working on it, keep improving it. Don't stress out too much. I know I over-optimized too early, so I'm kind of talking to myself on this part, but just don't be like that. Keep moving forward. You're gonna get better. Today I'm going to be talking about how making too many decisions each day can actually be holding you back in both your business and personal life. So you might be familiar with CEOs or presidents that they don't actually pick out their clothes, or they just wear the same thing every day. And the reason behind that, or that we're told is the reason, is that it's in order to not waste willpower on decision making that is not really that important. So if we think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? But at the same time, how much decision fatigue really comes from such a small decision? Maybe you don't actually pick the color t-shirt that you wear each day, so you just grab what is the closest to you, like I do. I just grab the nearest shirt to me that's in the drawer each morning. But I don't really waste time on actually like picking a certain color unless, you know, you see one and it just appeals to you a little bit more. But it doesn't feel like it actually takes that much willpower or effort in order to pick the thing that you want to wear that day. And so you might be thinking, well, really, how does that play a role in your whole day, right? Because you make many decisions all day and you're kind of used to it. So why would that matter so much? But if we notice the wording I just used, we make many decisions each day. And so in reality, if we have 500 of those decisions, which we do, I think the numbers are in the thousands of decisions that we make each day that we don't realize that we're making them. You know, it could be like, well, what time am I going to brush my teeth at? I'm going to go right now. Oh no, I got to do this first. But how am I going to do it? I'm going to take the trash out, but am I going to take all the trash out? Am I going to do the recycling? Am I going to do this? So you're doing a lot of those things almost subconsciously. You don't actually recognize that you're doing them. And so I think things like this that could seem a little bit extreme actually do end up making sense. But I would argue that you should probably start with the slightly larger decisions. And this was something that I really appreciated from a Sam Ovens video on decision fatigue. And so he pointed out, he kind of illustrated it. He said it much funnier than I'm going to say it. But basically, you know, you wake up in the morning, first you got to pick where to eat or what to eat. And so, you know, maybe you'll go out for breakfast and then you go and you're like, oh, well, what do I want to have at the restaurant? And then you pick this or you pick that and you're not sure. Oh, but I feel more like this. And then you eat that. Then you got to come back to the home. You feel bloated. Then you start your work day that you apparently do while you're bloated. You get about 30 minutes of work in because even though you were there for 3 hours, and then, oh, it's already time for lunch. So now you got to have another meal. But not only do you eat another meal, you have to waste the time deciding on what to eat for that meal. The meal makes you tired again. Then you do that again and so on. And it continues. You want to pick what movie you're going to watch that night. What are you going to have for dessert? Are we going to go out with the family on the weekend or are we going to go here? So there's just all these like bigger decisions. And a lot of them have to do with like daily activities like meal preparation and where you're going to go, what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, in addition to all of these subconscious decisions that you're making each day. And it just all bundles together. And if you're running a business, then you have to make all of the decisions in there as well. So we're just trying to save the majority of our willpower for the things that require the most focus or are the most important, because we don't want to be wasteful, because we can be really tired and still decide that we're going to cook steak instead of chicken. You know, that's not like a high stakes decision that requires having a ton of willpower. I'm trying to think of ways that I could continue to apply this principle even more so in my life. I try to keep things pretty regular, or I just eat whatever is in front of me unless I have a reason, or I'll just take from like one or two pre-selected options to keep things simple. Like I said before, I will just pick the same shirt every morning or just whatever is the closest one to me. I don't try to make unnecessary trips. Even if I go out to a coffee shop, I will try to pick essentially the same thing every time. But it's also because I just like those things. And so if you take that extra time to kind of figure out what things that you like already that you could be happy with on a regular basis. This doesn't mean the most tasty food. This doesn't mean the most fun thing, because if you eat too much dessert, you don't even enjoy it anymore, right? So if it's just too much sensory activation, too much dopamine being triggered by it, then it's actually probably gonna burn you out of that sort of perception, I guess you could say. So I try to pick the things that I feel like I could have every day. And now that decision has been made for 6 months, I don't have to think about it again for that long. And it just allows me so much more focus on more important decisions, and to not trick myself into thinking I'm making a good decision when really I started out the day with this much willpower and this much bandwidth to make good decisions from. But then now I'm worn down to here because I've just been out wasting a bunch of effort on things that didn't really matter, like, picking clothes, which food to eat. And so, yeah, I think this is a really interesting concept. It kind of intertwines with focus and how if you just stay disciplined, then the results are really going to come. Because if you're able to kind of get these more pointless things out of the way, and then this isn't to say you should never enjoy yourself. It's more like how I'll apply it is 80% of the time I'll be doing things that way. And then maybe 20% of the time or 10% of the time, whatever the ratio really is, but just a smaller fraction of the time, I will then, go have fun, try different things, experiment with different things, or maybe like have that on a set day. Like maybe you go out on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then you just do all those fun things on that day. But every other day or every weekday or work day, which for me is pretty much every day, but normally on a work day, you just have the same thing so that you can kind of maximize the focus, get into that flow state essentially, and then maybe at the end of the day, when you're already tired, when you've already done your deep work or whatever you want to call it, you've already got that, you've taken care of it, and now if you waste a little time picking dinner before you go to bed, that's fine. That's probably fine, But I've noticed so many people, and I probably was doing it, a few years ago. I tried not to do it now, but they would just spend so much time on picking things that didn't really matter. Like, if you think about how many meals you eat, it's just such a time suck. Like you do it 3 times a day. And if you go out for any of those meals on a regular basis, then it's just so much time. It's crazy when you think about it. Like the time to pick the food, the time to eat the food, the time to come back from the food, to get focused again, answering unplanned phone calls, picking out Netflix shows, picking out YouTube videos, all of these picking things. It's just so many choices, and you already have to make really good choices in your work. And you might think, like I was just thinking about, well, what do we really pick when we're working? So maybe I'm writing some code, or maybe I'm doing some copywriting, or maybe I'm writing an email to a client. And all of those are requiring little choices all over the place. Like when you're writing out a letter or an email to a client, or you're writing your newsletter, or you're writing whatever, you're picking every word. And some of that is on autopilot just because you're an adult, and so you sort of have phrases that you already like to use and you're already in the habit of, but you're still picking the words that would be best suited for this context. When you're writing the code, you actually, it's so much decision making that you aren't thinking about, because you are deciding what is the best for this scope of code, as well as the larger scope, as well as the entire application, as well as the infrastructure, as well as the potential attack vectors, as well as the user experience. You're thinking about everything at the same time. That's kind of why some people have said that interrupting a developer while they're in the middle of a hard problem is like interrupting somebody in the middle of a extremely long division problem that they're doing in their head. I don't know if it's that hard, because I think you will have to redo all the work in the math instance, but it can be kind of that way when you do get interrupted. And that's because you've made so many choices and you're holding so many of these things in your memory and continuing to make choices. It takes so much willpower. I think that was also something like chess players, and they're making decisions, right? And memorizing things in their head, and they burn like 1,000 calories an hour or something really ridiculous like that. Yeah, but pretty much everything is decision making in a professional services aspect. And if you think about the people that are doing that, you know, the teams that they have around them, like whether it's the president and he has all his suits picked out for him, whether it's a CEO like Tim Cook or Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, if it wasn't important, then I really don't think that their teams would make sure that that happens. It's something to think about. And maybe we could say, well, I'm not at the scale yet for that to matter, where my decisions will affect thousands of people. Yeah, definitely. But your decisions 100% are going to affect you, and whether the business does well, or like whether you can get the business off the ground, or whether you just made one, you know, lucky decision, and now what are you hoping to get you through the next rough part? Is it going to be another lucky decision, or is it going to be good decisions that were made with a lot of effort and then applied and worked through, and then you have to continue to make decisions in order to fulfill those decisions and keep people happy, and, you know, just manage your cash flow properly. Like everything is a decision. And so I think it's just like energy conservation. Like it's gotten to the point I just absolutely hate picking restaurants. I don't want to pick any restaurants. Don't ask me to pick a restaurant. I will see something that I like on Instagram, bookmark it, and then 6 months later when I'm in that city or whatever, then I go. I don't even look for alternatives. I just make sure that it has a good rating, and that's all I'll do. That's my novelty, you know. Just see something, okay, that's good enough, as long as it's nothing bad. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting way of looking at it. It's like a different aspect of discipline, focus, energy conservation, and it just makes so much sense why it works to me. You know, it makes sense to me why it works. Some people might think that, oh, it's overkill, but I think that if a lot of people think that it's ridiculous, then that probably means it's a decent idea, or there's something to it, you know. Because I think we should work a lot more than we do, and so you want to make sure that that work is as high quality as you can. The more you dilute it by breaking it up into smaller pieces and less concentrated efforts, I think the work quality overall just suffers. And if the work quality is 10% worse, that could be the difference between you making the sale or not. You know, it's like if a landing page is good enough for somebody to buy from it, then that means probably more people are willing to buy from it. It's not like a linear progress where you start making one sale a day and then you make a button color slightly different and now you make 2 sales a day. It's more like you're making 0 sales a day and then you finally figure out the formula and now you're making 3 to 5 sales a day. It's like it either works or it doesn't, and then once it starts to work, it really starts to work. There are some things that are linear, but that type of a thing, it's usually a bit more binary. And then it's a bit more exponential. Like once it gets working, it works. But then you just go 10% higher, and then the results are like 50% higher or 100% higher. It's compounding or exponential. So I think at least I definitely want every sort of edge that I can have in my favor. And because of that, I don't want to take the risk. I definitely don't feel like I'm benefiting if I spent 2 hours to pick my food each day. Whereas if I had an extra 2 hours to make decisions for what words go on a landing page, I definitely think that that's going to help. I actually applied this and really saw the results of this when, for probably a period of just like 3 months, every morning, I would just make a sandwich. And that was my breakfast. And then I would get to work for a few hours. And then for lunch, I would just have another sandwich. And then I would keep working. And then maybe for dinner, I'd have something different, like go out and get some tacos or whatever. And I'm not saying that this was the healthy choice. There was a much healthier version of what I was doing, but I was just doing it very, very simple. And yeah, so I didn't have to make like a big conscious effort to be really disciplined. It was like just by eliminating all these unnecessary choices, I just chose to be more disciplined. And I got so much work done work that I had been putting off doing, work that I didn't want to do, work that I didn't know how to do, and then I just figured it out. And then I ended up benefiting from that work for years later, just by a few months of a really concerted, undiluted effort. It's just another way of cutting out the waste or the unimportant parts, cutting off the fat, and then making things lean just so that you can get to that next level. So I hope that one of you, if even one person who watches this video, can break some limiting belief and give something a try, something new a try, just a step forward towards creating something that they want to exist, then that would be amazing.